Okay, I'll open with a prayer if you'll bow your heads with me. Our Father in heaven, we come before you at the end of this year. Once again seeking thy face through the study of thy word. I pray, Father, that you will be with us both here and those who are watching and listening on the podcast, that your words will be my words, and that you will bless me with understanding as I seek to explain this 23rd chapter of Alma and relate it to the fulfillment of prophecy. And these things I ask in the name of thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. Okay, we're at the 23rd chapter of Alma. And there's a pretty good transition here. We go from the wars with the Lamanites, which were led by Nephites, Nephite dissenters, and beginning with verse 1 of chapter 23. And now it came to pass in the commencement of the 25th year of the reign of the judges over the people of Nephi. Okay, that's at 67 BC. Only 67 years before the birth of Christ. They having established peace between the people of Lehi and the people of Morianton concerning their lands, and having commenced the 25th year in peace. Nevertheless, they did not long maintain an entire peace in the land, for there began to be a contention among the people concerning the chief judge, Pahoran. For behold, there were a part of the people which desired that a few particular points of the law should be altered. But behold, Pahoran would not alter, nor suffer the law to be altered. Therefore he did not hearken to those who had sent in their voices with their petitions concerning the altering of the law. Therefore those which were desirous that the law should be altered were angry with him, and desired that he should no longer be chief judge over the land. Therefore there arose a warm dispute concerning the matter, but not unto bloodshed. So here's a minority of the people in a democracy seeking to make changes that the majority of the people weren't in agreement with. And it came to pass that those who were, this is verse 5 of chapter 23, and it came to pass that those who were desirous that Pahoran should be dethroned from the judgment seat were called kingmen. For they were desirous that the law should be altered in a manner to overthrow the free government and to establish a king over the land. And those who were desirous that Pahoran should remain chief judge over the land took upon them the name of freemen. Now that was the name of the people that had sought to maintain their rights for their families and their religion and all under Moroni. Moroni had introduced that name for the people that stood for democracy. And thus was the division among them, for the freemen had sworn or covenanted to maintain their rights and the privileges of their religion by a free government. Now, the kingmen did have scriptural support for their ambitions to be kings. Now, I'm not going to read it, but I'm sure they argued from 2 Samuel chapter 7, 11 to 17. That's 2 Samuel 7, 11 to 17. And 1 Chronicles 28. 1 Chronicles 28 and 4. Now, In verse 24, I'm going to jump ahead here just a second. Verse 24 of the 23rd chapter says, "And the remainder of those dissenters, rather than to be smote down to the earth by the sword, yielded to the standard of liberty and were compelled to hoist the title of liberty upon their towers and in their cities, and to take up arms in defense of their country." That wasn't the one I wanted. Verse 21. Verse 25. Verse 25 of chapter 23. "And thus Moroni put an end to those kingmen, that there were not any known by the appellation of kingmen. And thus he put an end to the stubbornness and the pride of those people which professed the blood of nobility." We have the same thing in our country today, only the kings of our country today are the super wealthy, the military-industrial complex that former President Eisenhower warned us about in 1961. So that's just to establish that these were Mulekites. Now, as you'll recall, back in Mosiah, Alma 23:25, I already did that. Helaman 2:129. Yeah, Helaman 2:129. I'll get it here. Here it is. Helaman 2:129. "Now the land south was called Lehi, and the land north was called Mulek, which was after the son of Zedekiah." Zedekiah being the king of Judah at the time that Lehi left Jerusalem. "For the Lord did bring Mulek into the land north and Lehi into the land south." Now, the dividing line of that would be approximately where the border of Guatemala and Mexico is today. Yaxchilan on the Usumacinta River, the River Sidon, was probably the city of Zarahemla, and that would have been pretty close to the southern part of the land of Mulek. Of course, it had become completely integrated, being the capital of both the land north and the land of Nephi, or not the land of Nephi, but the land of Zarahemla. And then the land desolation would have been a small part of the land where the Straits of Tehuantepec cross, would be the border there. I'm going to, in support of that, I'm going to go back here to Mosiah 11:78. Mosiah 11:78. Okay, Mosiah 11:78. "Now there were not so many of the children of Nephi, or so many of those which were descendants of Nephi, as there were of the people of Zarahemla, which was a descendant of Mulek, and those which came with him into the wilderness." Now that's when Mosiah led a remnant of Lehi's people northward out of the land of Nephi into what became the land of Zarahemla. Okay, so we've established that. Also, many times when it says that these renegades tried to go into the land northward, they knew that they would have allies in the north part of the country in the land of Mulek. So sometimes we have them going north and sometimes we have them going to the land northward. The land northward was the Yucatan, the land of Mulek. The land northward was beyond the Straits of Tehuantepec up into Mexico proper. Okay, now I think we're ready for verse 9. 23:9. Okay. Now those which were in favor of kings were those of high birth, and they sought to be kings, and they were supported by those which sought power and authority over the people. Those would have been people like Amalickiah, who went and unified the Lamanites. Then here soon we have one that invades and goes straight to the land of Zarahemla, which was the southern regions of the land bountiful, which was the southern regions of Mulek. Okay? So we do have these divisions. It's like the two parties we have today, basically. But behold, this was a critical time for such contentions to be among the people of Nephi. For behold, Amalickiah had again stirred up the hearts of the people of the Lamanites against the people of the Nephites. And he was gathering together soldiers from all parts of his land and arming them and preparing for war with all diligence. For he had sworn to drink the blood of Moroni. There's another a cause for migration southward of the Lamanites. And also all these things also would cause migrations northward of the Nephites across the Straits of Tehuantepec or across the line desolation into southern Mexico. Now his armies were not so great as they had hitherto been because of the many thousands which had been slain by the hand of the Nephites. But notwithstanding their great loss, Amalickiah had gathered together a wonderful great army, insomuch that he feared not to come down to the land of Zarahemla. Yea, even Amalickiah did himself come down at the head of the Lamanites. And it was in the 25th year of the reign of the judges, and it was at the same time that they had begun to settle the affairs of their contentions concerning the chief judge Behoron. Now this is still in 67 BC. And it came to pass that when the men which were called kingmen had heard that the Lamanites were coming down to battle against them, they were glad in their hearts, and they refused to take up arms. For they were so wroth with the chief judge and also with the people of liberty that they would not take up arms to defend their country. That sounds like a group of people bent on revenge, doesn't it? Which is a big part of our political situation today. Campaigns based on revenge instead of on enacting legislation for the people. And it came to pass that when Moroni saw this, and also saw that the Lamanites were coming into the borders of the land, he was exceeding wroth because of the stubbornness of those people of whom he had labored with so much diligence to preserve. Yea, he was exceeding wroth. His soul was filled with anger against them. And it came to pass that he sent a petition with the voice of the people unto the governor of the land, desiring that he should heed it and give him, Moroni, power to compel those dissenters to defend their country or to put them to death. They were much more wise about dissenters than we are. For it was his first care to put an end to such contentions and dissensions among the people. For behold, this had been hitherto a cause of all their destructions. And it came to pass that it was granted according to the voice of the people. And it came to pass that Moroni commanded that his army should go against those kingmen to pull down their pride and their nobility, and level them with the earth, or they should take up arms and support the cause of liberty. We have that going on right now. Right now. And it came to pass, this is verse 22 of chapter 23, and it came to pass that the armies did march forth against them, and they did pull down their pride and their nobility, insomuch as they did lift their weapons of war to fight against the men of Moroni, they were hewn down and leveled to the earth. And it came to pass that there were 4,000 of those dissenters which were hewn down by the sword. And those of their leaders which were not slain in battle were taken and cast into prison, for there was no time for their trials at this period. And the remainder of those dissenters, rather than to be smote down to the earth by the sword, yielded to the standard of liberty, and were compelled to hoist the title of liberty upon their towers in their cities, and to take up arms in defense of their country. We've got to kind of keep in the back of our minds through this that even though there was a central government in Zarahemla, the cities were pretty much independent, sort of like our states. And they could enact their own internal laws as long as they didn't conflict with the national law, like we do today. But these cities were semi-independent, and we'll see more of that as we get into Helaman, how independent these cities are. Pretty much like our states today. And we have some states that are attempting to maintain our democracy and others that are attempting to try to establish a autocracy. It's just as simple as that. And thus Moroni, this is verse 25, and thus Moroni put an end to those kingmen, that there were not any known by the appellation of kingmen. And thus he put an end to the stubbornness and the pride of those which professed the blood of nobility. But they were brought down to humble themselves like unto their brethren, and to fight valiantly for their freedom from bondage. Behold, it came to pass that while Moroni was thus breaking down the wars and contentions among his own people, and subjecting them to peace and civilization, and making regulations to prepare for war against the Lamanites, behold, the Lamanites had come into the land of Moroni, which was in the borders by the seashore. Okay, now the land of Moroni was on the southeast part of Belize, today's Belize. It'd be down around the area of Punta Gorda town. And we still have independent Mayan tribes living in that whole southern region today. And it came to pass that the Nephites were not sufficiently strong in the city of Moroni, therefore Amalickiah did drive them, slaying many. And it came to pass that Amalickiah took possession of the city, yea, possession of all their fortifications. And those which fled out of the city of Moroni came to the city of Nephihah. And also the people of the city of Lehi gathered themselves together and made preparations, and were ready to receive the Lamanites to battle. But it came to pass that Amalickiah would not suffer the Lamanites to go against the city of Nephihah to battle, but kept them down by the seashore, leaving men in every city to maintain and defend it. And thus he went on, taking possession of many cities, the city of Nephihah, the city of Lehi, the city of Morianton, the city of Omner, the city of Gid, the city of Mulek. All of these were in the east borders by the seashore. So he was just moving up the coast of modern-day Belize. And this had been an area that had been occupied by the Lamanites before. Remember earlier, the Lamanites that lived by the west shore, by the West Sea, in the East Sea, were those that lived in tents. And few chapters back, or maybe one chapter back, Moroni had gone in to both the East Seashore and driven the Lamanites into their own land south. That would have been across the border down around Livingston, Guatemala, and on the west seashore down back into the land of Nephi, which would have been about where the Usumacinta River originates. And thus had the Lamanites obtained by the cunning of Amalickiah so many cities by their numerous hosts, all of which were strongly fortified after the manner of the fortifications of Moroni, all of which afforded strongholds for the Lamanites. And it came to pass that they marched to the borders of the land Bountiful, driving the Nephites before them and slaying many. So they went all the way up the coast of Belize, up at least as far as the Hondo River, which separates Belize from Mexico, at the southern reaches of the Yucatan, which would have been the southeastern limits of the land Bountiful. Verse 35. But it came to pass that they were met by Teancum, who had slain Morianton and had headed his people in his flight. And it came to pass that he headed Amalickiah also, as he was marching forth with his numerous army, that he might take possession of the land Bountiful and also the land northward. So here Amalickiah is trying to get in to the land of Mulek, where he likely would have found sympathizers, remembering Amalickiah himself was a dissenting Nephite. And the captains of his armies were mostly Zoramites, which were also dissenting Nephites. But behold, he met with a disappointment by being repulsed by Teancum and his men, for they were great warriors. For every man of Teancum did exceed the Lamanites in their strength and in their skill of war, insomuch that they did gain advantage over the Lamanites. And it came to pass that they did harass them, insomuch that they did slay them, even until it was dark. And it came to pass that Teancum and his men did pitch their tents in the borders of the land Bountiful. And Amalickiah did pitch his tents in the borders on the beach by the seashore. This would have been in the area of Chetumal, Mexico, the most southeastern city. And after this manner were they driven. And it came to pass that when the night had come, Teancum and his servants stole forth and went out by night and went into the camp of Amalickiah. And behold, sleep had overpowered them because of their much fatigue, which was caused by the labors and heat of the day. And let me tell you, the heat can be horrible there. The wind comes off the Caribbean Sea. Because of the difference in sea breeze and land breeze, by 10 o'clock in the morning, you've got a 10-mile-per-hour plus breeze. By afternoon, you've got 15-mile-an-hour breezes, but it's bringing moisture-laden air in. So this would have been about March of the season, possibly April, about the time of their change of the year. And by that time, the Caribbean Sea is heated up to around 80, 82 degrees. So that brings in extreme humidity. And then when you're in armor, you're packing your food, you're packing your weapons, and you've been marching for miles, that heat and humidity can just devastate you. And it came to pass that when the night had come, this is verse 40, Teancum and his servants stole forth and went out by night and went into the camp of Amalickiah. And behold, sleep had overpowered them because of their much fatigue, which was caused by the labors and heat of the day. And it came to pass that Teancum, I take that back. This was in the 67th year, so this would have likely been May or June. And it came to pass that Teancum stole privily into the tent of the king and put a javelin to his heart, and he did cause the death of the king immediately, that he did not awake his servants. Hi, Jim. We're at 23rd chapter of Alma. Okay, 23rd Alma, verse 42. Okay, Jehoiakim has just killed Amalickiah with a javelin in Amalickiah's camp, verse 42. And he returned again privily, that is privately, to his own camp. And behold, his men were asleep, and he awoke them and told them all the things that he had done. And he caused that his armies should stand in readiness, lest the Lamanites had awoke and should come upon them. And thus ended the 25th year of the reign of the judges over the people of Nephi. And thus ended the days of Amalickiah. Okay, now chapter 24. Oh, we're making good time today. I can't wait till we get into Helaman. Chapter 24. And now it came to pass in the 26th year of the reign of the judges over the people of Nephi, behold, when the Lamanites awoke on the first morning of the first month, okay, that's April, behold, they found Amalickiah was dead in his own tent. Okay, so it did happen in April then. And they also saw that Jehoiakim was ready to give them battle on that day. And now when the Lamanites saw this, they were affrighted. And they abandoned their design in marching into the land northward, and retreated with all their army unto the city of Mulek, and sought protection in their fortifications. Now the city of Mulek was likely founded by a descendant of Mulek himself. So that would have been a city of Judah, because Mulek was of the tribe of Judah. And it came to pass that the brother of Amalickiah was appointed king over the people, and his name was Ammoron. Thus King Ammoron, the brother of King Amalickiah, was appointed to reign in his stead. And it came to pass that he did command that his people should maintain those cities which they had taken by the shedding of blood. For they had not taken any cities, save they had lost much blood. And now Jehoiakim saw that the Lamanites were determined to maintain those cities which they had taken, and those parts of the land which they had obtained possession of. And also seeing the enormity of their number, Jehoiakim thought it was not expedient that he should attempt to attack them in their forts, but he kept his men round about as if making preparations for war. Yea, and truly he was preparing to defend himself against them by casting up walls round about and preparing places of resort. Yeah.
Excuse me. I study Hebrew some, and it occurred to me not too long ago, just talking about the Mulekites, that the Hebrew word for king is melech.
Yeah.
So I found it interesting that Mulech is, who those people became. The people of the king. I would assume the people who followed the king from the sacking of Jerusalem.
Yeah, and we find that Melech is spelled a couple of different ways in the Book of Mormon, because the Hebrews didn't use vowels. They only used consonants. So as Joseph Smith was translating with different scribes, sometimes the scribe would spell it M-U-L-O-K, sometimes M-U-L-E-K, but that's just another evidence of the Hebrew nature of the Book of Mormon. Let's see. Yeah, and I would remind you that of the fortifications that he had thrown up around these cities, you had the big ditch, probably 12 to 16 feet wide, with a huge mound of dirt on the inside, and stockades on top of that. So when Amalickiah was determined to maintain the cities they had already taken, because he had lost much blood, lost a lot of soldiers, because the only way they could try to enter is by the passageway, the main entrance to the city. And it would have been just like the Russians attacking the Ukrainians now. The Ukrainians are in these poured concrete cities, and the Russians are losing thousands of troops just trying to take a city where the Ukrainians lose maybe 1 for 20 or 1 for 50 even, you know. Well, this was the same kind of warfare that Amalickiah was conducting, trying to take these cities. So indeed, there had been much bloodshed of the Lamanites. But if the Nephites were good at what they call tactical retreat, which I'm sure they were, they would have managed to maintain their numbers. Okay, chapter 24, verse 8. And it came to pass that he kept thus preparing for war until Moroni had sent a large number of men to strengthen his army. And Moroni also sent orders unto him that he should retain all the prisoners which fell into his hands, for as the Lamanites had taken many prisoners, that he should retain all the prisoners of the Lamanites as a ransom for those which the Lamanites had taken. And he also sent orders unto him that he should fortify the land Bountiful, and secure the narrow pass which led into the land northward, lest the Lamanites should obtain that point and should have power to harass them on every side. And Moroni also sent unto him, desiring him that he would be faithful in maintaining that quarter of the land, and that he would seek every opportunity to scourge the Lamanites in that quarter of the land as much as was in his power, that perhaps he might take again by stratagem or some other way those cities which had been taken out of their hands, and that he also would fortify and strengthen the cities round about, which had not fallen into the hands of the Lamanites. And he also said unto him, I would come unto you, this is Moroni speaking, I would come unto you, but behold, the Lamanites are upon us in the borders of the land by the west sea. And behold, I go against them, therefore I cannot come unto you. Now the king, Amaron, this is Amalickiah's brother who was slain, another Nephite in charge of the Lamanite armies. And now the king Amaron had departed out of the land of Zarahemla, and had made known unto the queen concerning the death of his brother. Remember, after Amalickiah usurped the power, the kingship over the Lamanites, he married the widow, the queen of the Lamanite king, and had gathered together a large number of men, and had marched forth against the Nephites on the borders by the west sea. And thus he was endeavoring to harass the Nephites and to draw away a part of their forces to that part of the land, while he had commanded those which he had left to possess the cities which he had taken, that they should also harass the Nephites on the borders by the east sea, and should take possession of their lands as much as it were in their power, according to the power of their armies. So since the Lamanites had managed to capture these fortified cities, he didn't need near as many troops to maintain them. So he went across the foothills of the Maya Mountains, across Guatemala, to the west seashore, and was now driving towards the land desolation, the Straits of Tehuantepec. That's why Moroni wanted Teancum to take part of his forces across Yucatan and fortify the Straits of Tehuantepec, the line between the land Bountiful and Desolation. And thus were the Nephites in those dangerous circumstances in the ending of the 26th year of the reign of the judges over the people of Nephi. But behold, it came to pass in the 27th year of the reign of the judges that Teancum, by the command of Moroni, who had established armies to protect the south and the west borders of the land, had begun his march towards the land of Bountiful, that he might assist Teancum with his men in retaking the cities which they had lost. And it came to pass that Teancum had received orders to make an attack upon the city of Mulek and retake it if it were possible. And it came to pass that Teancum made preparations to make an attack upon the city of Mulek, and marched forth with his army against the Lamanites. But he saw that it was impossible that he could overpower them while they were in their fortifications. Therefore he abandoned his designs and returned again to the city Bountiful to wait for the coming of Moroni, that he might receive strength to his army. And it came to pass that Moroni did arrive with his army to the land of Bountiful in the latter end of the 27th year of the reign of the judges over the people of Nephi. Okay, the latter end of the year would be March again. So they've had a whole year transpire here. And in the commencement of the 28th year, we're now down to April of 64 BC, Moroni and Teancum and many of the chief captains held a council of war, what they should do to cause the Lamanites to come out against them to battle, or that they might by some means flatter them out of their strongholds, that they might gain advantage over them and take again the city of Mulek. And it came to pass that they sent embassies to the armies of the Lamanites, which protected the city of Mulek, to their leader, whose name was Jacob, desiring him that he would come out with his armies to meet them upon the plains between the two cities. But behold, Jacob, which was a Zoramite, would not come out with his army to meet them upon the plains. And it came to pass that Moroni, having no hopes of meeting them upon fair grounds, therefore he resolved upon a plan that he might decoy the Lamanites out of their strongholds. Therefore he caused that Teancum should take a small number of men and march down near the seashore. And Moroni and his army by night marched into the wilderness on the west of the city Mulek. And thus on the morrow, when the guards of the Lamanites had discovered Teancum, they ran and told it unto Jacob their leader. And it came to pass that the armies of the Lamanites did march forth against Teancum, supposing by their numbers to overpower Teancum because of the smallness of his numbers. And as Teancum saw the armies of the Lamanites coming out against him, he began to retreat down by the seashore northward. And it came to pass that when the Lamanites saw that he began to flee, they took courage and pursued them with vigor. And while Teancum was thus leading away the Lamanites, which were pursuing them in vain, behold, Moroni commanded that a part of his army, which were with him, should march forth into the city and take possession of it. And thus they did, and slew all those which had been left to protect the city, yea, all those who would not yield up their weapons of war. And thus Moroni had obtained a possession of the city Mulek with a part of his army, while he marched with the remainder to meet the Lamanites when they should return from the pursuit of Teancum. And it came to pass that the Lamanites did pursue Teancum until they came near the city Bountiful. And then they were met by Lehi and a small army which had been left to protect the city Bountiful. And now behold, when the chief captains of the Lamanites had beheld Lehi with his army coming against them, they fled in much confusion, lest perhaps they should not obtain the city Mulek before Lehi should overtake them. For they were wearied because of their march, and the men of Lehi were fresh. So here we are, back in that high heat and humidity again, with all this armor and weapons and everything, trying to march forth and conduct battle. Now the Lamanites did not know that Moroni had been in their rear with his army, and all they feared was Lehi and his men. Now Lehi was not desirous to overtake them till they should meet Moroni and his army. And it came to pass that before the Lamanites had retreated far, they were surrounded by the Nephites, by the men of Moroni on the one hand, and the men of Lehi on the other, all of whom were fresh and full of strength. But the Lamanites were wearied because of their long march. And Moroni commanded his men that they should fall upon them until they had given up their weapons of war. And it came to pass that Jacob, being their leader, being also a Zoramite, and having an unconquerable spirit, he led the Lamanites forth to battle with exceeding fury against Moroni, Moroni being in their course of march. You see, these were people who once knew the gospel of Jesus Christ and had completely turned away from it. Therefore, they became more wicked than those who had never known. That's what's happening in this nation today. Therefore, Moroni being in their course of march, therefore Jacob was determined to slay them and cut his way through to the city of Mulek. But behold, Moroni and his men were more powerful, therefore they did not give way before the Lamanites. And it came to pass that they fought on both sides with exceeding fury, and there were many slain on both sides. Yea, and Moroni was wounded, and Jacob was killed. And Lehi pressed upon their rear with such fury with his strong men that the Lamanites in the rear delivered up their weapons of war, and the remainder of them, being much confused, knew not whether to go or to strike. Now Moroni, seeing their confusion, he said unto them, If ye will bring forth your weapons of war and deliver them up, behold, we will forbear shedding your blood. And it came to pass that when the Lamanites had heard these words, their chief captains, all those which were not slain, came forth and threw down their weapons of war at the feet of Moroni, and also commanded their men that they should do the same. But behold, there were many that would not, and those who would not deliver up their swords were taken and bound, and their weapons of war were taken from them. And they were compelled to march with their brethren forth into the land bountiful. And now the number of prisoners which were taken exceeded more than the number of those which had been slain, yea, more than those which had been slain on both sides. And it came to pass that they did set guards over the prisoners of the Lamanites, and did compel them to go forth and bury their dead, yea, and also the dead of the Nephites which were slain. And Moroni placed men over them to guard them while they should perform their labors. And Moroni went to the city of Mulek with Lehi, and took command of the city, and gave it unto Lehi. Now behold, this Lehi was a man who had been with Moroni in the more part of all his battles, and he was a man like unto Moroni. And they rejoiced in each other's safety, yea, and they were beloved by each other, and also beloved by all the people of Nephi. And it came to pass that after the Lamanites had finished burying their dead, and also the dead of the Nephites, they were marched back into the land bountiful. And Teancum, by the orders of Moroni, caused that they should commence in laboring and digging a ditch round about the land, or the city bountiful. And he caused that they should build a breastwork of timbers upon the inner bank of the ditch, and they cast up dirt out of the ditch against the breastwork of timbers. And thus they did cause the Lamanites to labor until they had encircled the city of Bountiful round about with a strong wall of timbers and earth to an exceeding height. And this city became an exceeding stronghold ever after. And in this city they did guard the prisoners of the Lamanites, yea, even within a wall which they had caused them to build with their own hands. Now Moroni was compelled to cause the Lamanites to labor, because it was easy to guard them while at their labor, and he desired all his forces when he should make an attack upon the Lamanites. I want to talk a little bit about the city of Bountiful here for a second. If you'll remember, when we get to it, in 3 Nephi, 5th chapter, it was the 2,500 men, women, and children that were gathered to the temple in the land bountiful, probably in obedience to the law of Moses, which they were still under. And then, unsuspectingly, Christ came to them. They didn't know. They weren't there gathering expecting his return, because at first they thought he was an angel. This is the same city, Bountiful, that Moroni has used the Lamanites to cast up even greater fortifications. Now, I can't say with certainty, but there's a city in east central Yucatan called Bacan, and a string of foothills that run south, west, and northeast, part way up through Yucatan. And this city has the remnants of a huge ditch, a huge earthen wall, and they found the posts where the posts were in for the stockade around it. And I wish I had a source. I wish I knew the source of this. But it would have either been Joseph Smith Jr. or the Smith which followed him as president of the church. They and some of the leaders of the church went on a trip through Yucatan by pack mule, because there weren't any roads there yet or anything other than paths. Went to the city of Bacan. And as the story goes, they were all gathered together on the top of one big structure. And then they lost track of Joseph, or, well, whichever Smith it was, I'm not sure. I wish somebody could find that letter or whatever. And when they did find him, they saw him standing on the top of another large structure. And when they got back together with him again, he said that the Lord revealed to him that this was the temple from which the high priesthood was translated. Because if you read your Doctrine and Covenants, that's one of the privileges of the high priesthood, is to be translated without tasting of death. Now, we haven't had that in the Restoration. Who wants to go first? Go ahead, Ron.
I was interested in listening to some of these stratagems of the battles and wars. Have a cousin, her husband made it to lieutenant colonel in the armor, Tim and Michelle. And Tim said that he spent quite a bit of time studying the battles and the stratagem listed in the Book of Mormon here. And that he used it in his war games and in various places to develop his strategies that he used in battle. And he says the description of the battles here, it's excellent techniques and stuff. And so he says, people say, oh, this is just fictitious. Joseph Jr. was not a war combat. He didn't understand battle and strategy. This is another testimony to that there was something beyond what Joseph knew to write down these ideas. Not just talking about Christ, talking about the techniques of battle. Comes, and there's another testimony that this was written by something beyond Joseph Jr.
Oh, yeah. Well, Moroni was led by God. He was a man of God. Moroni and Lehi both. Yeah, Woody.
Do you have any idea, these letters you're talking about, what happened after the martyr?
I read that back in the 90s somewhere, and I've got no idea where I found that.
Anywhere in church history, possibly Volume 1 or anything? Have you seen
I don't
anything
know,
in that?
but it must have been in the Yucatan was still relatively unexplored in the late 1800s, because they had the Mexican government had a terrible time trying to subjugate the natives of Yucatan.
Well, I understand
And
that.
the caste wars went on from like the 1880s clear up to World War I. And in fact, most of northern Belize is populated by Mexicans who were fleeing what they called the caste wars that were going on in Yucatan at the time. So I'm guessing it was probably Joseph Smith Jr. in probably the 1870s or something like that. Or the third, I'm sorry, yeah, Joseph the Third. Yeah, Jim.
Do you know any Mormons that might have access to those archives?
I do not know. I do not know.
Well, it'd be interesting for us for a few of us to explore that and see if we could find, those letters or that
Which
occurrence.
which book of church history would cover Joseph the Third's period of time?
Well, that would get up, into the second or okay, yeah.
It might be in there somewhere.
Well, you could explore that and see. I'm just
Joseph
interested.
the Third's autobiography?
Yeah.
Oh, well.
I'm just kind of wondering about that.
FRA and the Brown brothers and some people that have been down there so much, maybe, I don't know.
No, I doubt it. I'm reading the first book of church history right now. Boy, there's some revelations and stuff in there that never made it into the Doctrine and Covenants.
Well, no, that's true.
Pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Well, we need to wrap this up.
Yeah.
It's past 10 till. We'll begin next week with let me get my glasses on so I can read this. With Alma 2459. Alma 2459 for next week. And I thank you so much. And I want to add one more thing before we shut this off. The most profound revelation of the spiritual condition of a people of a church is how much they look forward to Wednesday night prayer meeting, because that is the meeting where we truly worship our Lord and Savior. And I would urge all of you to add to our 6 or 8 who come on Wednesday night so you can share with us the spirit that we have in that service and the testimonies and the prayers that we have for one another. We really, really need, the time is truly short, people. That's why I'm emphasizing this in chapter 23, how it correlates to what's going on in our country today. Thank you very much.